So firstly, I'd like to start by making an apology. The reason why I apologise, not for not having my presentation on the laptop, is I apologise for our industry. And the reason why I apologise for our industry is actually relatively simple. Have you ever known an industry that uses as many acronyms as we do? Because I don't. Now for me, I come from a technical background, and I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at understanding things. But I think the point and the question that you asked earlier was, you know, us in our industry, we're actually quite poor at communicating. And the reason why I say that is simple. I think a report came out, I think it was a couple of months ago, from the Wall Street Journal, and it said 56% of board members of large organizations have no understanding of security breaches. That actually is a problem. And it's a problem for communication. So the other aspect I'd like to ask, I mean, I come from a technical background, as I said. Have any of you been in a meeting with a lot of technical people, and you've walked out of that meeting after 30 minutes, an hour, and you've thought, I didn't understand a word they said? Yeah? Because I have. And so if we actually start to understand that and start to communicate better, I think that's one of the things in which we can actually improve our situation. Technology is important, we know that. But technology along with process and people is how we fix the problem. It's not just by throwing technology at it. Of course, Fortinet, we're a technology company, we'd love you to buy products, but there's an awful lot of other things that I think you need to put in combination with that we haven't done historically very well. So, just to combat, you know, what I said about too many acronyms, we've got APTs, we've got ATAs, we've got lots and lots of them. But the important thing I think for us to understand is communication, and understand and break it down to actually quite a base level, in layman's terms, as to make this not too difficult, so that the business can actually understand. Interestingly enough, a good friend of mine, he works for a large UK bank. I won't name the bank and I won't name him. But I meet him for lunch about once every 3 months. And I said to him, you know, I said, what keeps you awake at night? You know, what do you really worry about? Is it the hacktivists? Is it the lizard squads? He said, no. He said, forget about them. He said, I'm not bothered. He said, they actually tell me what they're going to do before they do it. He said, okay, they can cause some damage. He said, my biggest problem is the fact of the people and the crime, or the cyber criminals. He said, because to that, he said, I don't know what they're going to do. He said, not only that, I don't even understand what their goal is. And that's a big problem. So for about 6 months last year, I actually, I say took a sabbatical. What I actually did was left Fortinet and came back. But what I did do is I went working in cyber intelligence for the sole contractor to the US government. And some people might ask, you know, why does the US government need to buy information from a contractor? Well, it's a very good question. But of course, as a commercial organization, we weren't governed by US law. So where we collected our information and collected information on these cyber criminals was really important. But moving on. So we've obviously looking at, you know, some of the issues that we've got, you know, these advanced targeted attacks. We look at the anatomy of an attack. We look at how they do it. One thing and one vision that, or one visibility I did get when I worked in cyber intelligence was simple. These are organized people. They run it as a business. Never confuse it, you know? And I'm not saying that the sky's falling in, the world's coming to an end or anything like that. But what I am saying is it's all about the money for them. When I was in cyber intelligence, we were asked to write a report. The report was actually on the target breach. And we were employed by the US Secret Service to look and understand what had actually happened. Now, it's all public knowledge now, you know, how they got in, what they did. Still to this day, however, we really don't know how long they were in for, how long they had access to that information. That, to me, is a worry. And obviously, going back on what Cisco was saying as well, you know, that length of time and period is critical. How do we improve it? How do we shorten it? Because once they've got in, it's a problem. How they do it, okay, But the important thing is understanding their goals. You know, I think I heard a new term a couple of months ago that we've all heard of, spearfishing, all the rest of it. The new one is whale hunting. Going after senior members of an organization and focusing on getting their information. Because they typically have privileged information. They have a lot more access to things. That's what the cyber criminals are doing. They're clever guys. They're organized. They have their own HR departments, IT departments, you know. Europol, I think, announced last year. In Europe, there's about 100 people that really know what they're doing in this area. Those people are extremely valued assets within these organizations. They're paid lots of money. Why are they able to pay them lots of money? Because there's a lot of money in it. So we look at how they do it. You know, we look at this, you know, everything from social engineering. They want 0 days. They want botnet activations. Interestingly enough for me, it's about understanding the bad guys, understanding what's in their head. So I present at a lot of conferences, and the one message I want people to understand, you know, my esteemed colleague from Cisco said, you know, it's not if but when. Exactly right. But for me, more importantly, stop thinking of your information as to the value it means to you. That's not important anymore. Think about the value it means to the bad guys. Good example of that is there's a company that we work with that they actually design and write algorithms for credit card fraud. And so we went in and said, okay, what do you class as your valued asset? And they said, our intellectual property, the algorithms. I said, okay, so how often do you update the credit card companies? Well, it's constant, you know, at least once a week. Oh, you have access to their networks? Yeah. That's what the bad guys want. They're not bothered about the algorithms. They don't care about that. But you have to start thinking like they think, and that's important. But again, this timeline is extensive. When did they get in? What was their goal? What were they trying to do? You know, I worked in DDoS. I've worked in DDoS for about 12 years. That's stopping it, not doing the DDoS, by the way. But interesting for me, you know, their goal is relatively simple. Take out the service by what any means they can. But data breaches are different. You don't know what information they're after. You don't know how they're going to get it. You don't know how they're going to get in. And once they've got it, how long are they going to keep it? What are they going to do with it? Interestingly enough for me, the target breach was critical because literally 24 hours after it was identified they were in, 40 million credit cards are on sale. That shows how quick they can react. The problem is, as organizations and as businesses, we don't react as quick. And that's a problem for us. Now, we say the threat's worse than ever. You know, we don't want to scare you into disconnecting from the internet or disconnecting your networks, but we have to be realistic about the threats. Interestingly enough, and I know they're not presenting here today, so I can quote it, but Microsoft, you know, they write software, great. The problem is, and it makes, you know, this problem isn't going away, we're all human and we make mistakes. Vulnerabilities are not going away. Now, luckily for us, and I think it is lucky, the bad guys are actually quite lazy. And that sounds a bit crazy. But they will much rather use old stuff than create new stuff. That's a little bit different. So they'll track back. They'll understand. We now look at what the motivation is. Everybody sees in the press about the hacktivists, about the bad guys, about the anonymous, as I said, the lizard squads, whoever it is. It doesn't really matter. The majority of attacks today are about the money. Not about political gain, not about taking off websites, not about the Chinese attacking the Americans or stealing information. It's about money. And that's the important thing we have to start understanding. 2014 was a busy year. There was lots of things going on, lots of attacks happening. Heartbleed. It was the one that never really happened. I think for the first time ever as an industry, and you know, talking about us talking to each other, ethical disclosure I think is important. You know, if we've got information that is a serious security issue for a number of organizations, we should share that. And I think we are getting better as an industry, but we're not the best we could be. But that's where we need to improve. Now, for us to do that, of course, we need to know about the security breaches that happen. Because one of the problems that we have with an awful lot of organizations is they don't like admitting it. You know, it took Target, I think, a number of months, which you can understand why, because the CEO actually got fired because of it. But it's important for you guys to actually disclose that as well. Not necessarily how they got in, but what their motivation is. Because if we can understand that, we can help you. So it's sharing that. Interestingly enough, you say eBay, no one's immune. So everybody had to change their passwords. Big deal. Is it a big issue? Was it a big problem? Well, if you actually look at it, it was. You know? 145 million users had to change their passwords. If you actually look at the numbers, 551 man-years wasted. That's a lot of time, a lot of issues. So everybody just had to change it. But it's a big issue. So now we start looking at advanced threat protection. How are we going to help you protect? Well, the critical message I will give to you, and I think other vendors will say it as well, there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that will fix all of these things. We talk about layered approaches. We talk about, okay, perimeter security versus internal security versus demarcation. All of these things matter. But the important thing, and I heard it in the other presentation, was it's not if but when. When are you going to get attacked? When are you going to get breached? Because if they really want to get in, they will. And it's how quickly you can shut that down, lock that down. You know what the goal is, you know where they've been, and you know the information they've got. If you do that, you've got a chance. You know, I used to, one of the roles I had was, I don't know whether any of you know about the Aramco breach. And so I did an audit, or I was part of the audit team about 3 months before that happened in 2012. Interestingly enough, they had 3 levels of firewall. And I've never seen a rule set so locked down and so tight. So somebody walks in with a USB. 30,000 hard drives deleted. That's because they didn't plan for when. Oh, if they get in, if they do this, no. The problem is, you don't know what their goal is. It wasn't about stealing information, it was about taking down their back office systems. That was the goal that they wanted to do, for whatever reason, whether it was state-sponsored. But for the guys that actually did it, I think a number of them are still in Saudi prisons, serving time. But we're not the only people saying this, we're not the only people putting this message across. But interestingly enough, you need to break it down. You need to start understanding what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But more importantly for me, it's what you do when they've done it. So we've got the mitigation, we've got detection, we've got remediation, report, understand. Put systems in place and reporting systems. But not only do you do that, you have to also follow it up with process and understanding people. I think there was a presentation I saw a couple of weeks ago, and they quoted that for every $10,000 we spend on security equipment in the IT market, we spend $8 on training. That to me gives you a good message. It's the wrong way around. You know, we should be training people. I gave a good example to my colleagues. We were out for dinner last night, and I said, so the guy sat down in the post room. You know, what does he do? He's got he's got his PC. He's logging all the information coming in. He gets an email that says, naked picture of Halle Berry. Is he not going to open it? Of course he is. But it's about educating these people as well. So we've broken it down into these different sections, you know, access control, threat prevention, detection, but monitoring and remediation. These are all critical parts of a process. Technology is there to assist us in security. It's not the only method of security. You know, we deal very much and very well with physical security in our world. You know, I lock my money in a bank, hopefully it doesn't get broken into. But I trust that. Do we actually do the same in IT? I don't believe we do, and we don't do it very well. So I'm going to talk very quickly about antivirus. Would anybody ever connect up a PC to the internet without any antivirus? No, of course you wouldn't. But interestingly enough, it's if you look at the reports, as regards value, it's one of the lowest values in our industry. So yeah, antivirus, Antivirus is antivirus, antivirus, isn't it? Well, it's not. The issue that we have, and we develop our own antivirus, along with Kaspersky, along with Sophos, along with all these other different vendors. The problem that you have is signature files can't grow indefinitely. Now, take that back to the comment I said earlier. The bad guys don't re-engineer or engineer new methods. They use the old stuff. So if a virus hasn't been visible for a number of years, most vendors will actually remove it from the database. That's great for the bad guys. But importantly enough, we actually start looking. We all use these old operating systems, and they're still out there. But don't think AV is AV is AV, they're all the same. They are not. And that's one of the challenges that we have. The next part I'm going to talk about, very quickly, is sandboxing. And the reason why I talk about it is that complex threats. Why are the bad guys able to do what they do relatively easy? Well, because they know as much about the systems you're using as you do. That's simple. They know how to get around them. They know how to circumvent them. They know exactly what they're doing to make a threat complex. This is where this layered approach has got to come in. No one solution will stop everything. Even combinations will reduce the threat and the risk that you're operating at. Risk to me is not good or not bad. It's how much is acceptable to you. We know how sandboxing works. It emulates code, it emulates human interaction. It does all of these different things to help protect. But it can't be your only method. And this is the message that I really want to get across to everybody. And again, I'll stress, don't think of your information as the value to you. Think of the information as the value to the bad guys. Because that, at least then, you've got an idea of what they're going to be after. This payload analysis, yeah? Some people say, oh yeah, but I've got this perimeter security. It stops 98.6% or whatever it is. So that's 1.4% getting through. But the issue is the payload of the complex threats is thousands of percent more threatening. It's been engineered specifically to do a task, to do a job, to steal information, to delete hard drives, to do whatever the goal is. So you need to focus on that. The problem is in our industry, we have hype. We have, okay, there's a new technology, everybody goes out and buys it. Yeah, because it's great, isn't it? Wonderful. It doesn't fix everything. And the problem is, then you get what we call, on this curve, trough of disillusionment. Oh, it's not going to fix everything. What am I going to do now? What am I going to buy? What solution's coming out next? I know it's an ever-changing threat, and it's an ever-changing threat landscape, and it's tough to keep up with it. But the issue that you will have is, hopefully, the solutions that are out there and the complex solutions and the layered solutions will help you. That's where they should be doing, or that's what they should be doing. And of course, reports come out, failure of it. It doesn't always work. They are going to get through, as we said. More interestingly enough, it's about the process. You know, I think the very similar slide put up by Cisco. It's a continuous process. It's a continuous feedback. That's the trick in combating the bad guys, because they're constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. Now, I talk about DDoS. DDoS in 12 years has evolved massively. You know, it started out, let's just fill up height. Let's just bombard them with as much bad traffic. Well, we developed a mechanism to stop that, so they've developed a mechanism to find another way around of exhausting resource. We've got solutions as much as everybody else, not denying it. But more importantly, and the message I want to get across, it's about evolution. It's about changes. Now, obviously, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. It's an ever-changing environment. But working with our customers and working with yourselves, and feedback as well, because what we see in the market or what we see changing on the threat landscape is important. But the guys that are getting the security breaches and the guys that are getting the security issues, you're as important to us. So, wherever there's value, I talked about the money, but the issue that you have to have is respond. So, one last slide, very quickly. The point I'm going to make, going back to that meeting, the meeting that you all sat in, or some of us have sat in, and we walked out. Can I give you a word of advice? So the one quote I always use from one of the most intelligent people the world's known, Albert Einstein, always talk to the techies, and this is the quote I use: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Thank you.
Yes, Steve Mulhearn from Fortinet. Okay, any questions, please? Okay, Steve, can I ask one philosophical one?
Of course.
Yeah, you said the technology is going to assist us. But honestly, we humans are slow and I would say stupid.
Yeah.
Let us come to machine thinking, protecting people from their incompetences. And this kind of protection definitely means restrictions. Restrictions for us. And of course, we can compare Windows to Unix philosophies, etc. So
yeah.
we won't do that. But actually, we are talking freedom versus security. And how do you see the future? Tight or compromised?
Do you know, the business has to function. The business has to operate. You can't have a business, okay, that's using an IT infrastructure that stops the business working. And that's the issue, is that the IT part of it is not the business, but many of us think of it as critical to that. So I think controls in place are there. I don't think strictness of the control is the issue. I think it's the education. And that's where I think it's the whole point.
Education is definitely. Now, let us go to one simple, let us say, web service. You are applying for some web service, and it says, now, create a password, please. And yes, boom, it has to have at least 16 characters, 2 of them special, at least 4 numbers, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
It protects you, but it actually damages your business because it's hard to do business with this web service. So we are constantly running into these schemes, and maybe some fortification or standardization of such things would help if the people would embrace that.
I think so, yeah, I'll agree with that. I also think explaining to the people, so we say that's a really complicated password. It makes us difficult to do business with, as you quoted. Yeah. But I think if you communicate to the people why you're creating that complex password and the reason behind it, I don't think they have so much of an issue with it. If they understand that it's for their protection as well, I think it's that's the communication we should be passing.